and welcome to the latest Forever Blue podcast, which is different from the vlogging that I normally do at matches, because this is principally an audio podcast. Though if you're watching this now on YouTube, you can see that we're trying to experiment to see whether you like watching it on YouTube as well, because we record these podcasts on Zoom, which means that while we're recording them, you wouldn't have known this necessarily before. I can actually see the other people who are on the podcast and they can see me, and we're not together. So now you can see it as well. So my guests this week, before I do that, I just want to thank Edward Mellor, who are based in Stockport. They are auctioneers basically of property, buying and selling. Their next auction is on the 10th of September, lasts for 24 hours. And they, have properties that they sell as well as properties that you can put on there to sell yourself. So 22 days, have a look at their website, edwardmiller.co.uk, if you've got a property that you want to buy or you want to look at to buy or you have one to sell. And thanks very much to them for their support. So my guest this week are former City winger and one of my absolute heroes. I love this fella, Paul Simpson, Simo, as we knew when he was playing. I know I say this to lots of people, but he's one of my absolute favourite players and people that I've ever come across with City, and great to have him on. And also to Andy Jones, who's another regular. And although she's not with us at the moment, she said she'll be a few minutes late. Joining us is Louisa, who is these days a writer and I think podcaster on F1, Formula One, as well as being a big City fan as well. So hopefully a rising star, and great to still have her on the podcast. So City's last game, first game of the season, was Wolves away. I was down there at Wolves. I know you were as well, Andy, and everybody was raving about Reinders, the new midfielder. What did you think, Paul? I mean, I know you've only seen bits of the game rather than watching the full 90 minutes, but have you seen enough to be impressed by him?
I was certainly impressed with the whole performance, to be honest with you. I mean, it was I suppose as a manager and as a group of players, the way that the game panned out, it was a bit of a dream for that first game of the season to get off to such a strong first half performance, get the goals, keep a clean sheet, and it just sets them up nicely because they have had a disrupted pre-season because of the Club World Cup competition. So you never quite know what level the players are at, but I thought they looked excellent. I thought Trafford looked secure in goals. Nori looked a good acquisition. The Rangers was excellent in midfield, and even Cherky when he came on, he looked the part. He looked as if he had the tricks and the flicks, and got himself a really good finish as well. So no, it was a perfect start for them and sets them up now for the second one at home.
I try not to be negative, but last season there were times that even when City were winning games, when it felt a little bit too backward and sideways, and there were phases through games where I was getting a little bit bored, if I'm being honest, as much as City were dominating games. I didn't feel that way at all at Wolves. I really enjoyed the game. And in the end, it became one-sided, but it
Mm.
was just such beautifully gliding passing, and everybody seemed to be on the same page as well. Could you sense that from what you saw?
I could, yeah, yeah. They looked as if they looked to be a really good unity in the camp, and I know it's early, but last season there seemed to be something that was missing. I agree. There was times where I actually found it quite boring. I think the unbelievable technical players, but it didn't get me on the edge of my seat. But I think when you've got people like Bob in the team, who he's such an exciting talent, and then you go and bring somebody like Doku onto the pitch, they're players who do excite. And I hope that Phil Foden can get back to what he was as well, and he can come back into it, and he can show everybody what he's all about because they've got some talented footballers there.
I mean, you mentioned Oscar Bob there and Doku. You were a winger. As a viewer of football, I love players that take people on. That's why I love
Yeah.
watching you play and Peter Barnes and players like that because taking players on and committing them rather than playing it safe and keeping possession, which I know is what Pep is generally all about. make it is so much more exciting. And I know that Doku can frustrate because people say he hasn't got any end product or doesn't have enough end product, but it's still exciting to watch somebody take somebody on, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. I think it's something in the game that's sadly missing. That player, and it's quite strange, really, because in the academies now, they're well, maybe not so much now. I've come away from that a little bit over the last few years, but they were all about technical players, good in 1v1 situations, particularly attacking, not on the other side of it. There did not a lot of work goes on in that 1v1 defending situations, but you've got some real exciting players. But then it seems to be that they get into first team football, into that senior football, and they clam up and they're not able to go and do that 1v1 stuff and go past players. But those two are really exciting. And I mentioned Phil. Phil's exactly the same. He loves going at players, and he can go at players and still see the pass. It's probably the one thing that Doku needs to add to his game. But it's there's certainly exciting players, and on Saturday they showed that ability to be able to go at people and to be able to produce that final ball as well.
I've just joined a group called Finalysis, which is a new thing where you give players marks out of 10 and everything. And I actually gave Pep the biggest, because you can mark the manager as well. I gave Pep the biggest, highest total because I thought, how does he seamlessly bring in new players year after year, players that I hold my hands up, maybe a few years ago when I was working at the BBC and I had the remit to have an overall view of everything. I would have been more aware of them. But I admit that Cherky wasn't a player that I particularly was familiar with, or Rangers, and yet we've seen other big players come into other clubs, and I've heard of them, and yet these are players I hadn't particularly heard of, and yet you look at them and you think two-footed, look comfortable on the ball, glide around the pitch. Florian Wirtz, for example, I watched a bit of the Liverpool game the other night, and he looked like he was struggling to fit into the tempo of their team, and yet the new players at City did it perfectly. And so I give all the credit to Pep for that. Does he deserve that credit, do you think, Paul?
Well, I think there's probably a lot more people in the background who also deserve credit because there's a huge recruitment team at City who work behind the scenes and they're looking around. And there's been some disruption there over the last year or two with key members of staff leaving. But they've obviously got an incredible database of who's out there, um, what they're doing. I don't know whether they work off data like a lot of other clubs do, but they'll have people all over the world who are looking at these players, who are identifying what they need. Pep will certainly be involved in it because he will have criteria that he wants these players to be able to do. If it's a midfielder, whether it's somebody who wants them to break play up. But you look at City players, nearly every single one of them are comfortable on the ball. They're comfortable receiving it in tight areas and are not afraid to receive it. And that's the remit with Manchester City and with Pep. They have to be able to receive the ball in tight areas. They have to be able to see a pass. In a way, they've got to be brave to want to play all the time because it's easy to just take the sort of the easy option and launch it long, but they don't. They want to play, they want to do it. And I think you have to give credit to Pep because he's the one who's saying, well, no, I've looked at somebody like James Trafford and I think he's the future of us. So we go and do that now. And even people like Ait Nouri, who was, really good footballer playing in lesser Premier League sides. But you have to give him credit for identifying when's the right time for these players to come in and to change those positions. So there's probably a lot of people who deserve a pat on the back for the work that's gone on to get these new signings.
Did you enjoy the game as much as I did, Andy? You were there on the terraces the same as I. Did it feel different to you, that performance, than what we were watching a lot of last season?
Yeah, I had a ringside seat. I was right up on the halfway line, row two. And so what struck me even before we kicked off actually was the intensity of everything that we did was so much higher. I mean, you give credit to Pep, and yeah, of course, we talk about Begiristain and Viana as well as part of the recruitment, and we've got new coaching staff. And what struck me was the intensity of the warm up. and particularly the warm-up that the central defenders did with Kolo Toure. I've never seen anything quite as intense before a match. So, that, and you could see that in the first 20 minutes that because of those two playing so well in that position, we managed to catch Wolves offside 3 times when they probably could have scored 2 goals in the first 20 minutes. So I think, you've got to look at the detail always. And then, of course, before the game, meeting up with a lot of Blues in Stafford before the match, people weren't entirely as optimistic as we probably feel now. So I think that the fans, I felt, were very uplifted by what they saw on Saturday. And that was, it wasn't side to side, it was more direct, it was so much better, the quality of the play in midfield. I think the signings that we've made, let's just hope that's just not a 1-week wonder, because if it isn't, then really every team's got to worry, because we've really got a team who's hungry again. And I think that's what was very clear to me on Saturday, is that it has been a step up. And perhaps the Club World Cup's actually been a good thing for us, getting out when we did, and having that team together for longer. It might pay dividends, but only time will tell. So yeah, the new signing Bob, he looks a good player as well, doesn't he? Good to see him back. And we've still got people sat in the stand who will be wondering if they can get in the team. So that's great. And so yeah, I think Spurs will be a tougher test, I'm sure, and we'll talk about that, no doubt. But you've got to remember that I think that despite the fact that we rolled Wolves over, I don't think that they've moved forward since last season either. So I don't want to pour water in the wine here, but I think they're a team who are going to be struggling in the bottom of the division, maybe trying to keep up above the teams that have come up.
For now, I'm feeling giddy. I'm thinking Pep loved and idolised Johan Cruyff and loves total football. And apart from James Trafford, who obviously is a specialist goalkeeper, I know he can add to it with his distribution, but he's still a goalkeeper. And maybe Erling Haaland, who is I don't think fits into the total football style of City quite the same. Might be a specialist in finishing, but you wouldn't describe him as being a part of that fluent footballing system. Apart from that, the other 9 and the ones you mentioned on the bench all seem to be, I wouldn't say clones, that's a very unfair word, but all with these same levels of ability that mean that they could almost all play in each other's positions. Is that how you see it, Andy?
I do. I really do. I think that what struck me, as well as the players coming on Saturday, was absolutely nobody had a below par personal performance. And when you combine that with the team, knitting together so well, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with. So yeah, giddy. I like that. Let's see after we've played Spurs and Brighton and Man United after the international break. But yeah, I'm absolutely sure that something has definitely clicked with the players in pre-season, and we haven't normally come out of the blocks so fast at the first few games of the season. But I really felt as though if we were giving marks out of 10, I'd be struggling to give anybody less than a 7 or even an 8. I think everybody put in a really good shift. So yeah, I like the optimism of what Saturday did. It made the journey home much more fun, and looking forward to the next game.
Well, Louisa's with us now. Lovely to have you with us, Louisa. What did you get out of watching that game at the weekend?
Yeah, I came in at quite a good time, really, of what was being said there by Andy. The new players have brought a breath of fresh air into the side, which was badly needed. I know we've had new players come along even last season, but these two have just come out of the blocks absolutely on fire, and there's absolute quality there already. We've had players come along that we've developed into quality, and these two already, from me, the two that have scored are absolutely awesome. And you mentioned Cruyff, and we've got a fantastic Dutch player there that's just joined us. And Cherky was being compared to Kinkladze by one of the commentators, and saying that he looked like he had a real sort of similar swagger. He's definitely got a very handy back heel that seems to be quite accurate at the moment. But I feel like yeah, you can tell we've had a break. You can tell that it's a new season. There's fresh legs, lots of enthusiasm. A couple of the players that we could have been criticizing a little bit last season or towards the end of last season were awesome. I know you absolutely dislike stats, Ian, but there are people that probably listen that don't dislike them as much as you. But we had 90% pass accuracy, which is what I was going to jump on with what Andy said when I just first came into the podcast there, is that 90% accuracy is exactly what got us those goals, because we have been very guilty of not necessarily being that accurate, of sometimes being very slow on the ball, and you're right, all this side to side stuff that everybody knows that's listened to me before winds me the heck up. I absolutely hate it. I'm always being a go straight down the middle as fast as you can and obviously get those passes accurate. And that was exactly the way I love to watch football. Doesn't matter who's playing. I don't care if it's Italy in a World Cup final. I love that kind of play. I love that kind of speed and accuracy. So yeah, I felt it was awesome. 15 shots, 4 on target, 4 scored. Our new goalkeeper looks half amazing and then half still got a lot of work to do, but still awesome. Trafford, really great. And yeah, I did notice Diaz just did a couple of little slips, but it's forgivable because nothing went bad, nothing went wrong. I thought we were great pulling the offside there, in those couple of players. I do feel, Andy, sorry, I'm not going to argue with you because I love you to pieces. But I actually thought Wolves were all right. I actually thought they did really well. And I think they might sort of, be around the mid. If they can play other teams the way they played us and not get caught on the offside, I think they'll win quite a few matches this season. But you know what? Guess what? Top of the league.
Yeah, can't argue with that. Now, using Louisa's stats there, which I'm not a massive fan of, but actually they're even more impressive because of the fact that the passes weren't backwards and sideways. Because one of the things that's annoyed me before about the stats is that they pick, and this isn't about the player I'm going to name now, but I remember reading a stat that John Stones had the most accurate passing, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, he's playing as either a defensive or a defender, and so therefore most of his passes are relatively safe. So that's where I don't agree with stats. But Paul, you've been a manager, you've been a player, you've been a coach, you've done everything in the game. How much do you use stats? How much have you used stats? And how important are stats?
Well, I think you have to use them because they're there for you now, and they're a valuable tool to use. I look at them, but I'm more about the territory where those stats are being built up. So, I look more at maybe final third entries, successful passes into the final third, successful dribbles, successful crosses, whatever. So when a cross comes in, do you make a first contact on it and get an attempt, or a first contact to get a second contact to get an attempt? So I'm a bit like you. I don't like looking at it and going, oh, fantastic, we got 80% possession. Oh, that's just in our own defending third there, though. I'm more about where's it gonna be. So if as Louisa said, they were going forward, so the passes were going into dangerous areas. They were taking defenders out the game, and people were getting in behind the Wolves defensive line. That's where it's important. And those are the stats that I like to see.
Spot on, I agree with that, Paul. For what it's worth, you're an expert and I'm just an onlooker, but I agree. So I'm not completely against stats, Louisa. What did you make, Andy, of Nico Gonzalez? Because obviously Rodri was still out. I went to the press conference on Friday and I have to admit that I thought Pep was a bit confusing in some of his answers when he was saying everybody's fit, and then suddenly Savinho and Edison, when he was pressed on them, one of them had an injury, one of them had an illness, and it sounds like they were kept. Anybody can sort of work out that there's things going on behind the scenes that may or may not come to fruition, and maybe managers can't say that and admit that, but it just meant that it was a little bit confusing. But what it all added up to was that even though Rodri was sat in the stand watching alongside Phil Foden, he didn't play, and Nico Gonzalez, who was brought in January because of the injury to Rodri, and didn't exactly light the place up in the opportunities had, looked a lot more assured to me and looked a lot more confident, a lot more relaxed in that game. What did you make of his performance?
Well, I think it helped who he had behind and in front of him. And I think that probably added to his confidence, because I thought he played very well in a deeper sort of midfield role where Reiners was obviously ahead of him, and I thought Stones had a good game of bringing the ball out. The Beckenbauer type stuff was in play at the weekend, not the tippy tappy sideways stuff. And
Should just explain, by the way, to younger listeners, Franz Beckenbauer was a player who played back in the 1970s, who was, I suppose he was the forerunner of Rodri in that position, wasn't he? Because he was I wouldn't exactly call him a defensive midfielder who brought it out, but that they called it a libero in Italian, didn't they, eventually?
yeah,
But that was the role he almost invented, wasn't it? I just wanted to let people
I think
know
it's,
that.
it's that kind of player who's playing in a defensive position. I think Bobby Moore, another one, confident on the ball. Alan Hansen. Sorry, you'll have to explain all these people now. But that kind of player, I think, and I think we miss John Stones a lot. And I think when he's around, I definitely think we've got an added sort of strength in that central position. So I think it helps everybody, and I think it helped Nico. And I just think that there must have been a great feeling coming off the pitch at half time and at 90 minutes for all of those players who were involved in the match, because I think they must have all felt, wow, we've really stepped it up here. Because that's how it felt I'll tell you what happened near us, just to give you an example. Somebody tried to start at Poznan, and they were quickly told to stop and say, save it for when we're 4-0 up against United. And I like that. That's a bit like not getting carried away, Even though we're 4-0 up with 15, 20 minutes to go, it's still, come on, it's not there yet. Let's enjoy. But we've got to see how we progress over the next few weeks.
Am I wrong to be giddy then, Paul?
No, I think you've got to enjoy wins, but don't start making space in your trophy cabinet for something coming in just yet. I think that's the one thing. It's funny because when you've been in football for a long time, and I've been in it since 1982, you get to a point where you realize you do have to celebrate wins. You have to celebrate them because there's some crap coming round the corner. So you've got to enjoy it. And I know when I worked at Premier League level with Newcastle, our draws or wins were so few and far between that we bloody celebrated whenever we got anything. Now it's different for City, but no, you have to enjoy it. I just want to go back to what you were saying about Nico Gonzalez there, that he struggled last year, but
I wouldn't say
yeah,
struggle, that's perhaps unfair, but
yeah,
he didn't have
not to
that
the
impact
level.
that we thought.
Yeah, no, that's it. Firstly, it's really hard for a foreign player to come into a new country and to be expected to just settle straight away and hit the ground running. That's the first challenge they've got. Now, then the second challenge he's got, what a pair of boots he had to fill in Rodri. There's not many players who are going to come into a team and fill those boots to the level that you would all want to. So, you probably have to. And also, City weren't the team last season that they have been for the past however many years. They were having a bit of a tough time. They just had that one season too many with that group, that it was going to be difficult for him to settle into it. And hopefully now he's had 6 months of being in England and getting used to how Pep works and getting used to everybody else and feeling more comfortable in his own skin, that he can now go out and perform a little bit more relaxed and be able to show what he's all about.
I'm going to ask Louisa about Rico Lewis. I might ask you as well, Paul, because I'm sure you've come across him in your career. But he had sported a slightly shorter haircut and reminded me, that Italian, what was that Italian called, Andy, who came in the short term, quite a small Italian lad who came in, must be about 15 years ago, and played probably for one season. Somebody listening to the podcast will remember who I meant, and he reminded me a little bit of him just for a minute. But he almost looked like a different player. But again, maybe I'm getting giddy here, maybe I'm getting carried away. But he's had some stick, Rico Lewis, and I thought he played a little bit better at Wolves. But again, one game. Wolves might be strugglers this season. We don't know. Time will tell. What did you make of him, Louisa?
Um, did we have someone called Gaudino? Am I going too far back?
He did play for
Oh,
City, you're right. I think he sold cars in his spare time, but
no
that
way.
wasn't who I was thinking of. But yeah,
Okay.
that's one guess. Yeah.
All right, one guess out the way. Yeah, I've actually not Rico Lewis's biggest fan on the pitch. I don't know the guy personally. It's probably really, really nice. So sorry, Rico. But on the pitch, I've always been quite critical of him, and sometimes my nephew gets a bit cross with me when we're watching matches together because he quite sort of likes him and he thinks I give him an unfair bit of stick. But maybe my expectations are high of him. I don't know, maybe they're too high. I do feel like he's made some really sort of awful mistakes previously, and I guess that's why I'm not his biggest fan. But everyone obviously Pep likes him. Pep keeps putting him on and puts him on in play in front of other people that he keeps on the bench. That I personally wouldn't. I'd have things the other way around sometimes. But yes, obviously he deserves a second chance in my book. And you are getting giddy, Ian. You're allowed to. It's your
Yeah.
podcast. You can do what you want. Um, yeah, no, he's all right. If he's had a word with himself at any point, or if he's had extra training, or if he's just clicking a little bit more with some of the newer players or some of the older players, then fantastic. He's having good games and he's having a good game, then that's all right with me as well. And I'll be the first one to go back on my words if he really does a massive turnaround this season.
I love the fact that he has stated publicly that despite there being links away from City for him, that he wants to stay and fight for a place. And that Manchester City is the only place he wants to be. Now, as a fan, we all want to hear that, really, even when not always they mean it. But you know what I mean. You want to hear it, don't you? Have you come across Rico Lewis, Paul, in your role that you've had in the past?
No, I haven't, to be honest with you. He hasn't been involved in any of the groups I've been with. But I've watched him. And listen, a kid at his age to be a regular in a top Premier League side, that's some achievement in itself. So he's obviously got something about him. I think he's got that sort of infectious personality when he plays. He's a bubbly character who works, he absolutely works his socks off. He's here, there, everywhere. I talked earlier about Pep wants players who are willing to receive the ball in tight areas and who can, play on the half turn and find a pass. The bits I saw of him last year, I found he was a little bit negative in what he was doing. He was receiving and going back to stats, he was probably having 60, 70, 80 touches of the ball. But how many times did he go forward? It looked like he was more of I call him a continuity player, that people would just lend it to him and they'd give it straight back to them. And I found that's what he was like last year. Now on Saturday, I thought he was a little bit more forward thinking. He was receiving it and facing forward and playing forward more. And I think somebody like him, if he continues to do that, he'll be a bloody good player, because he's, like I said, he's got that infectious bubbliness about him that will rub off on other players as well.
How much do you read into the opening weekend? I watched the Liverpool game, and clearly towards the end of that match, they didn't look assured that they would win that game. They did in the end. And I read from that Liverpool have the capability, as we know they've had for a few years, of suddenly producing a bit extra to get them over the line. So they did it. Might not have been convincing, but they did it. Arsenal won at United. I didn't watch that match because I was away doing something on Sunday, but the reports would suggest and the highlights suggest that United dominated in terms of efforts at goal, and Arsenal got the one. Chelsea were the other ones who, at the moment, who are being tipped to be in the top sort of four and maybe in the shake-up. Home to Crystal Palace. Certainly, I expected them to win that game. So, of course, then I talked to City fans and all going, well, we win convincingly at Wolves, play like a dream. The other three are rubbish. We're going to walk the league. So you can see why I'm giddy, can't you?
Yeah,
What's your interpretation of what you've seen so far?
I think you obviously want to get a win on that first game of the season. You want to get that first win, your first 3 points in the bag. But I'm always a big believer. I mean, I've only had 1 or 2 seasons managing in the Premier League, but sorry, assistant manager in the Premier League. So in the football league, I always say after 10 games you can get a really good idea of how you are, and the table takes shape then. I suppose in the Premier League, where there only been 38, it's maybe 7 or 8 games you get a clearer picture of where everybody is. So as Andy said earlier, let's see how it goes against Spurs at home, then Brighton away, which is another tough game because they play good football, and then the United game, and then Arsenal. So you've got a bit of an idea then after 5 games as to where they are, and hopefully you still be giddy after that Arsenal game.
Fingers crossed. I mean, one of the things that a friend of mine taught me a few years ago was instead of after 10 games, 7 games, whatever it is, going, City have got this many points, and last year they had that many points from the
Mm,
same number of games. What he's taught me is to compare fixtures like for like. So last season, City beat Wolves at Wolves, all right. It was
mm,
2-1 rather than 4-0, but they got the 3 points at Wolves. Last season, City lost at home to Tottenham and lost away to Brighton. So there is an opportunity in the
mm,
next two fixtures to suddenly be 6 points ahead of schedule. And that would impress me more than the fact that they go, oh, well, they've got 9 out of 9 or whatever. It's that like for like games.
yeah.
Um, they're tough ones, Andy, aren't they? I mean, we don't know what to expect from the new look Spurs, quite. I mean, Richarlison, who's never really lit up Spurs, but suddenly scores a couple of great goals, and you wonder what sort of confidence he's got. And Brighton started with a draw, didn't they, at home, which is usually where they get most of their points from. Are they tough games? And now that you're giddy like me, are you expecting 2 more wins?
I would like to see us come out of those 2 games with 6 points, yeah. And I think we've got it in us. And that isn't just being giddy. I think that what I've seen on Saturday close up gave me a feeling that the only thing that didn't happen, I didn't think Wolves were physical, and Tottenham will be. That's the thing that there's always teams who get in amongst us and start to be borderline, because they think and there's clear targets now on players' backs as a result of Saturday's performance. So can expect a bit of rough and tumble on Saturday. Yeah, of course, Arsenal away, they battered us 4-1 as well last year. So that'll be a good benchmark to see how we're doing down at the Emirates.
It was 5-1, actually.
5-1. Sorry, must have
Even
left
worse
early
than
that
even
day.
worse than you remembered. You probably left after 4-1.
Oh no, I was on the seg line. It was terrible. Yeah, so that'll be interesting to sort of look at it mid-September, really, when I hope at least we'll have seen minutes on the pitch from Rodri. As soon as that guy's available, there's surely got to be a way we can involve him in games, at least for part of the game, get him involved in the season. Although it's a long season, we don't want to be looking back and saying, well, we've had a rough start because we didn't have X, Y, and Z available. Yeah, I think at home, the crowd will be up for it. And yeah, the new look Spurs, I think the thing that worries me about them is that I've just seen on Monday Night Football the analysis of how Thomas Frank set up their team against PSG and how they played versus how they played at the weekend against Burnley, who just come up. And it's very, very clear that there's some smart thinking going on here about how to set your team up against the opposition. Now, I don't think we have that book at City. I think we have a book that says this is how you play football, Pep Guardiola way, and we play it. Whoever we're playing against, and there's only been a few examples that I can remember, probably Atletico Madrid away being one of them, where we threw that book away for a day. But, you know, there's going to be definitely a look at, I think, how Spurs played against PSG, and that would be what I'd expect them to do. So that was a lot of direct balls, a lot of goalkeeper into the set, you know, into our half. So I think we'll be ready for that, and we'll have to have the people and the personnel available to deal with that on Saturday, which would probably mean we might set up a little bit more defensively in terms of personnel for the first half. Let's see. But overall, yeah, Richarlison looked like he had his shooting boots on at the weekend. I think probably of any of the teams that you wouldn't want to play second this week, it would be Tottenham. So all the ones that we expected to roll over didn't necessarily perform at their highest level. And the Spurs actually looked quite handy. But again, sorry to say it, but look at the opposition. And I think that might just be indicative of how that result was. And to some extent, sorry, I'm fixed on it. I don't think Wolves were that good, Louisa. And we'll see. Come the end of the year, we might have a side bet, eh?
Let me ask you this, Louisa, because Andy's already hinted at it, you know, changes because of the way Tottenham might play. And Pep's talked about, we know he's got a big squad, talked about trying to keep everybody happy by, he didn't use the word rotation, but that's what he meant, you know, letting other players have games. I know you're interested in psychology, and I know you talk about psychology quite a bit, but with this bigger squad that City have got, is the answer to keep rotating, to keep people fresh, or is it to have, as my son keeps saying to me, almost an 11 that you go to and just keep making changes? Where would you go with that to keep everybody happy and to get the best from City?
It's hard to keep everybody happy, but thank God I'm not Pep Guardiola or a football manager. I'm sure Paul can sympathise with that. I'm one of the kind of old school people that feels that, you know, there's a set 11 that start every game as long as everyone's fully fit, and arguably your 10, you know, your 11 best players. It's very hard to say who City's 11 best players are these days because they've got so much quality on the bench, and obviously as the other day showed, sitting in the stands. You know, we've got Rodri and Phil sitting in the stands, and it's kind of like, it's horrible for them and it's horrible for us to see it, but it's kind of nice to still have surplus players that are world class that can't even get on the bench now. But that's not going to be good for morale. I don't think it's good for morale and egos to be benched, to be the hero one week and then benched the next week. You know, as a manager, I don't really know how managers manage that, but I just like it in the past, in previous years, some years, not every year, but some years, there's been a sort of very clear top 11, and then I've questioned why then somebody in that top 11 doesn't start a game. I sort of feel that if I was a manager at this point, I'd put my strongest 11 on, and I wouldn't wait till the last 10 minutes to sub people. I really don't think that does anything, and I never have felt that does anything. I feel like somebody should either come off at half time and someone else should come on at half time, or at least, you know, have 60 minutes or something, 70 maximum, before you get another player on the pitch and give them a good go. So no, I'm a bit more of a traditionalist as well. You know, I'd like to have some consistency, especially when there's so many new people. I think we suffered last year because of that, because there were so many new players, and we did have some major injuries, and I just felt like it was just too bitty and not consistent enough, and not trying to get a flow going with kind of the players that we had available. So I'd like to see him sort of keep a similar squad every game. Not every game like as in FA Cup games and games like that. I just mean Premier League games. That's all I'm talking about. You know, and do that. So yeah, I'm old school as well, sorry. And yeah, Andy, let's have a talk about a bet, shall we? See where Wolves are gonna finish. Come on, Wolves.
They talk about, managers having, it's a problem that every manager would like to have, Paul. Having a big squad of very talented players, and they're all multimillionaires, let's be honest. They'll all have egos. They'll all want to play. They'll all have their brand that they want to have out on the pitch all the time. Is it a problem if you were manager of City that you would relish trying to keep all them players happy and pick that team every week?
It's an absolutely fantastic problem to have. I'm sure every time he selects a side, when you're the manager, and I used to have a whiteboard in my office with the little markers on it, and then at whatever point in the week that I'm settled on the side, and I'd go, right, that's it. I'd put my team on the board with the markers on, close the doors, and that was it. And we'd do the work during the week, and then on the Thursday or Friday, if it's definite, then I'd open it and say to the staff, right, that's what we're going with. And if you've got the list of players that Pep's got to select from, I'm sure he goes home the night before every game and thinks, wow, I am a lucky man to have that, because it's a great position. Now, the challenge is keeping them all happy, and keeping them all as motivated as they were going into the game on Saturday, because I'm quite sure the way he works. Well, in fact, I know this is in the past. There's times where he names the team an hour and a half before kickoff, and players wouldn't know until that point. So, they'd all be up for it, they'd all be ready for it. Now then, if you've got the likes of Savinho, Edison, who was the Rodri, Foden, sat in the stand, Nathan Ake, Akanji on the bench, all of these sorts of players, then
Undoing.
yeah, that's a really good problem to have. That's nice. Now, in a way, it's a little bit not lucky, but they're fortunate in a way that they've got Spurs and then Brighton's before the international break. So they've got 3 games to deal with before they have an international break. Now, I used to find that when things are going well, it happens and it works for you, because say for example, let's just say Phil Foden, because he's English and I'm all for English players. Let's say Phil hasn't got into the side when it comes to the end of the international break. Somebody may pick up a niggly injury that on returning from international, and suddenly a space opens up for a Foden to come in, or for Nathan Ake, or whoever it might be, and suddenly things just fall into place for you as a manager. So it may be that the thing that surprises me that I keep hearing from Pep is that my squad's too big. I don't like leaving players at home. Over the season, as they found last year, you're going to pick up injuries. And there's no point saying my squad's too big, I need to get rid of players, and then complaining that I've got injuries and I'm having to put academy players in. If you want to be successful at Premier League level, FA Cup level, Champions League level, you have to have a big group of players who are all equally able to step in and do a top class job. And that's what they've had in the past, and they've been able to keep everybody fresh and keep everybody right. And hopefully that's what they've got for this season as well.
Well, fingers crossed. So to conclude, I don't like doing predictions, but to conclude this podcast, I'm going to start with Louisa and finish with Paul. Spurs at the weekend at home. What do you think?
Oh no. Oh no. And we're gonna win, but I don't know what the score's gonna be. We should win at home, obviously. We want to win all our home matches no matter what. No, they might nick 1 or 2 maximum. I know. 4-2 to us.
All right, you don't have to give a score, by the way, but
I am. I
you
am.
you have done, and that'll do for me. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I'm similar to Louisa. I think there'll be goals both sides. I'd put us to win 3-2 on Saturday.
High scoring victory for City, Paul. Are you going with that?
I think it'll be a really good game. As a manager, I love what Thomas Frank does. I think he puts teams out, and going back to how we talked earlier about how they set up against PSG, he tends to go with a back three against the top sides, and the contrast from last season under Postecoglou was where they would push up to the halfway line and leave massive space. He will not leave space in behind, so City won't be able to get balls in behind and running behind them. Against PSG, they went on a massive high press to stop them starting, and most times, I think he's called Chevalier, the new keeper for PSG. He ended up going long, and I think if they end up going, if City go long, I think they could still be fine with Haaland up there. So I think it's going to be a really good tactical game, a really big test for City, different to the Wolves one. I still think City have got enough to win it.
Good stuff. Right. Well, thank you very much to everybody who's contributed to the podcast. Thanks very much to Edward Mellor. And of course, buying and selling houses is what they specialise in. So check them out. You'll easily find them if you Google them, Edward Mellor. And thanks for their support for the podcast this season. Obviously, I'll be at the game at the weekend against Spurs. So if you're down there at the match and you want to say hello, join in the podcast, the vlog, I should say. See, everybody gets confused as to what's the vlog and what's the podcast, and this will be even more confusing now we're putting this on YouTube. But anyway, you know what I mean. Then come and say hello and enjoy your week, because these are the good weeks. A week where there's no game in the middle, you can relax. You're the top dogs, top of the league, and I, for one, am very giddy. So enjoy your week, and thanks to everybody who's contributed. And if you only remember one thing from this podcast, remember this: it's great to be a Blue more than ever.